very much. I'm actually really excited to speak about this. This topic has been teaching me over the course of the last 4 months. It began with a conversation with my mentor. And do you ever have those, let me back that up. Have you guys seen The Lion King? You know the part where the little hyenas are all like, Mufasa, Mufasa, and they freak out, but one of them's like, ooh, say it again. You know what I'm talking about? So that's kind of how the Holy Spirit has been pointing this out to me all throughout this semester. It's just come up over and over and over again, and each time it's like, ugh, do it again. So there's that. My passage is Luke 8, 40 through 48. So if you have your Bibles open, you don't have to change the page, which is pretty exciting. But if you don't mind, before we start, if we can just pray, it'll help me kind of frame up my own mind. Father, thank you so much for your word. I thank you that you have revealed yourself, that you have revealed truth, that you have taught us. God, I ask that your teaching would come through the words that I'm saying. God, I ask that you would help me to step out of the way and that your truth would be spoken. I pray for peace and calmness and open ears to hear what you have to say. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. So I'm just going to read this really quickly, if that is all right. Starting in verse 40 of Luke chapter 8. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. When Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" all denied it. Peter said, "Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceived that power has gone out from me." When the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." As Christians, we tend to idolize a busy schedule. I know we're all, especially in this stage of our lives, very guilty of that. We spend so much time serving, studying, and socializing that we are constantly running from one thing to the next, leaving just enough room in between to grab a drive-through coffee to get us through the next 3 items on our to-do list. Yet, Jesus, in this passage, sets a far less hurried example. He's focused, he's present, he's attuned. Each move he makes, though it was at the direction of his Father, discerned through his times of preparation and prayer. Once he left these moments of solitude, he was there, he was in the moment, he was focused, he was intentional and aware of the people around him, crying out for healing. Like I said before, the sermon began teaching me in a conversation with my mentor in August. We're sitting outside of a Starbucks, and I was talking about how I was just nervous about this being my final semester, about being ready, about being prepared. And she said, you have to be focused right here, right now. She said, Tori, do this like it's your job. Do school like it's your job, because you are preparing to lead people to the feet of Jesus, and you cannot afford to be distracted. And that has really set deeply and heavily on me throughout this semester. Each assignment that I do that I'm like, I don't want to be doing this, is preparing me for the people that I'm going to get to interact with in the future. And to be honest, it's been extremely convicting. So diving into the text, there are 3 characters in a crowd. So to kind of set the stage, the story of the bleeding woman begins with a crowd. It's an expected crowd. They're all waiting for the return of Jesus. They've been waiting for him to come back across the Sea of Galilee. They're waiting for this return of the miracle man that they've all heard about. And previously in these past verses of chapter 8, Jesus had stilled a storm. He had cast a mob of demons out of the afflicted man and into a herd of pigs. And before that, in chapter 7, he had forgiven the sins of an adulterous woman in the home of Simon the Pharisees. And at this point, I think Jesus had become a little bit of a scandal. Everybody's talking about him. He's a performer of the miraculous on one hand, and on the other, he's a proclaimer of the outrageous. Whispers likely ran amongst the crowd, some good, some bad, but all intrigued. Everybody wants to know about him. So the crowd clamored and they crushed around him, intent to know just a little bit more about him. But the crowd was not the only one that was focused. An important man named Jairus is in the crowd, and he's also desperately focused, maybe the most focused out of the entire crowd. He's desperate to find Jesus because he's heard stories of this man who can heal the sick, and his interest is deeper than just theological concepts. He held personal stake in Jesus because his 12-year-old daughter was gravely ill. She was dying. Death was reaching out to take her hand, and so Jesus sought out this mysterious man who could possibly help his child. Jairus was a ruler in the synagogue, a character of great importance. The crowd would have surely known him and maybe stepped aside to give him a little bit of space so he's not being crushed in. But the disciples, especially, would not have been ignorant of the political intrigue that this character could have held for Jesus. He could have been a powerful ally for Jesus' ministry, vouching for the authority of Jesus' ministry, using his platform to suggest that Jesus was worth listening to, producing his daughter, if Jesus chose to heal her, as living proof of his power. But this powerful man doesn't assert his authority in this moment. He finds himself in the dirt at Jesus' feet, likely looking up through tear-filled eyes at the only man who could help his daughter. The text says that he pleaded with Jesus. He's begging. This powerful man, well known in his community, is literally on his knees begging for the life of his daughter. His focus is intense. In your life as a pastor, as a teacher, as a minister, whatever that looks like, your Jairus of sorts could be the flashy ministry, the camps, the conversion moments, the baptisms where, you look really good, you gave this speech and it just changed the world. But I challenge you to hold them up in the light of the story. The next character that we see is the bleeding woman, a rejected woman, like Angel had to say, a woman who just was not accepted in her community. She'd been the text says that she had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. Her age isn't specified, but I found the positioning of this revelation very interesting, given that it is held up directly next to the 12-year-old daughter. The text draws an interesting comparison between the two, perhaps intentionally holding them up in contrast. Two women in desperate need of healing by Jesus, one clinging to life by a thread, dependent on her father to bring Jesus to heal her, the other abandoned with no one left to chase Jesus down for her. For the duration of the entire life of Jairus' daughter, this woman had been outcasted from society, made to proclaim her shame aloud with cries of unclean, unclean, don't touch me, I'm not clean. Compared to Jairus' deep compassion for his daughter, this woman was utterly alone, lost in the midst of the clamoring crowd. Nobody would have seen her without disgust. In her isolation and perhaps her desperation, she reached out to touch the hem of Jesus' robe, focused on that one small scrap of fabric. Her body, weakened from years of blood loss, still managed to push through the crowd, crushing crowd to get to Jesus. This is not an easy crowd to wade through. Think walking through Chick-fil-A and trying to get your way to the front with nobody else in your way. She sought to remain anonymous and isolated for fear of rejection and ridicule, but she pressed on toward her goal. Her focus was intense. Who are the rejected women in your life? What are the ministry moments that are so small that they seem insignificant, maybe even annoying? What are those moments when you've set your eyes on something big, something that's really just going to swell kingdom ranks, and then you have to deal with that pesky sinner that won't quit bugging you? I had one of these moments just a few weeks ago in a class. We were talking about abortion and all of the nuances that came with that conversation. The whole time I had this weird awareness of a girl sitting across the room who I'd never spoken to before, but something about her just kept catching my eye. And in the middle of the discussion, she gets up and she leaves the room, and out of the corner of my eye, I can't really see her because I'm trying not to draw attention to her, but in the corner of my eye, I seem to notice that she's crying. And at first I thought maybe I was just imagining it, that maybe she was just using the restroom, and I'm definitely not trying to call attention to her there. But the longer that she was gone from the room, the more urgently I felt this voice in my soul telling me, Tori, get up. Tori, move. Tori, go check on her. Tori, go say something. And after about 10 minutes, it literally felt like the Holy Spirit was just yelling at me. And I had to admit, I failed in that moment because my desire to not call attention to her, or maybe not to call attention to me, overpowered this clearly prompted moment to get up and go. So I stayed. I was glued to my seat, maybe for those reasons, but maybe it was because I was too selfish to leave my comfort zone and focus on somebody else. The third character that we see in this story is a present God. When the woman touched Jesus' robe, miraculously, in that moment, her bleeding stopped. And it's mind-boggling. Jesus, in tune with the power that left him, said, "Who touched me?" Much to the distress and dismay of Jairus, who is currently leading him to his daughter, he stopped the entire crowd. He's scanning faces. He's looking for somebody who had received a touch from him. Peter misunderstood and chastised him, saying, hello, Jesus, everybody is touching you. Like, we're all touching each other. We're all up in each other's business. But Jesus was focused. He didn't want to be distracted. He understood the power of the touch and the deeper need that it came from. Fully present, he sought to deliver deeper healing than simply the physical. He knew who had touched him. His question was rhetorical in a sense, but he knew that what she truly needed was restoration. Verse 47 says, "Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at her feet. She had been caught. She likely feared what her desperation could have cost her, as touching Jesus would have also made him ceremonially unclean and likely very angry. Yet he listened without a word as she explained why she had touched his robe. He listened as she listed cures and doctors and rituals that had failed her, friends and family who had stopped checking in, relatives that had just left one by one. While Jesus and the disciples are sitting there stomping their feet like, we gotta go, they're sweating through their sandals and pointedly staring at their watches, Jesus came to a full stop before this rejected woman, completely present with her. His focus was intense. The crux of the story comes in verse 48 when he said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Daughter. The weight of that word is so significant. Again, the parallel is drawn between Jairus' dying daughter and this woman who was orphaned from parents who may have yet lived. Perhaps a wife who had been widowed by her husband's inability to carry her shame. With the title daughter, Jesus at once declared her acceptable, healed, worthy of God's provision. He restored her to society, and he gave her peace for the years that she had spent in this crushing, isolating, devastating loneliness. For the first time in 12 years, she had received a moment of someone's time without pity or disgust. It was unrushed and completely present, completely focused. Jesus refused to be rushed when it came to caring for people. He spent quiet moments alone with his Father, seeking him out before stepping out into the world to be with the people that he created. He lived his life on earth with intention, communicating messages about the kingdom of heaven with radical love as much as his teachings. He noticed those whom the world brushed aside. He stooped down into the dirt with them. His compassionate gaze was focused outward, looking for those who needed to be seen. As believers, we are to be followers of Christ, intentionally emulating his actions and imitating his posture. Where Jesus crouches down in the dirt, so do we. We should not be hurried in moments of caring for others. In our times of solitude, in these moments, in school, in homework, in prayer, we must prepare well so that when we step out into our day, we have intentional eyes seeking out the lost and the broken. Our focus must be intense. People are bleeding out in the streets, hemorrhaging right in front of us, and we don't have the basic human decency to look them in the eye, let alone the spiritual focus, the compassionate gaze, to see them, to gather them into our arms and whisper, you are a beloved child of a good and present God. So I want to leave you with these 3 questions. 1, how do you spend your time of preparation? Do you use it wisely, or do you always feel like you're playing catch up? Who can you identify this week who feels seen, unseen, or unheard? What image-bearing, rejected woman are we ignoring in favor of a big, flashy Jairus moment? And 3, what steps are you going to take to be the hands and feet of Christ in their lives? Let's pray. Father, thank you so much that you see us. God, we do not deserve the grace, the honor, the dignity that you give to us in the midst of our shame, but we are thankful for it. Father, we do not deserve the blessing of being part of your act in blessing others. But God, I ask that you would focus our eyes, that you would prompt our hearts, and that you would scream at us when you have to get us to open our eyes, take them off of ourselves, and step out into the world. Thank you so much for your love and your grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Very good. Who would like to start? Robert, go ahead. Start.
Sorry, I can't see if you guys.
Very good. It's like simultaneous.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I can't really put into words, I guess, but it was, I really enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say. It was really good. I liked it a lot.
Thanks, Rob.
Very good. Yeah, Angel.
I love how we did the same passage, but it was such a different take. But also like a powerful take of like looking at it for ministry. I love your passion and your momentum, like about driven. I'm like, yeah, like you're a really good storyteller too. And like, do you do spoken words? I feel like you'd be really good at spoken words with your passion.
I get in front of people and vomit. So no.
This was
Thank
really
you for not
impressive.
vomiting today.
Lots of no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, really impressive moment. One thing I would say is like, you know, you apologize a few times in the beginning, but like you, after you like stumbled like later on, like you didn't say sorry and you kept going, and I was like, yeah, she got it. But, like overall, like thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Yeah, Robert.
So, I was